Hey everyone, venture capital has been integral to the founding and formation of some of the most successful gaming companies today. From Riot Games to Supercell to Electronic Arts and companies like Twitch and Discord, some of the most successful gaming companies as well as game ecosystem companies were founded on the back of venture capital. So how does one raise money from a venture capital firm? How would you reach out to them? What do those companies look for investment? Well, today we speak with Yuan, who is an early stage investor at Greycroft, which is one of the most well-respected venture capital firms focusing on the gaming space. And so with that, let's take it to Yuan right now. Hey everyone, I'm here with Yuan from Greycroft Capital. Joe, I thought we could first start by having you just introduce yourself a little bit and then talk about Greycroft in terms of what does Greycroft do?
Yeah, sure thing. As an introduction, name's Joe. I grew up in Atlanta and then went to school in Chicago, worked in finance for a couple of years, and then went to business school on the West Coast in Stanford, and then came down here and joined Greycroft. Greycroft is an institutional VC fund based in New York and LA that looks at generalist Series A and growth opportunities for funding. I spend most of my time on a separate vehicle called the GC Tracker Fund, which focuses exclusively on gaming, esports, and VR/AR at the seed stage level. So there's a variety of different stages of funding available. Generally, you start off at the seed or pre-seed stage, and then you move on to your Series A, Series B, and additional stages afterwards. So I like to spend my time on earlier stage companies as you get more exposure to management and you get to shape the future of the company a little bit more. So it's been fun.
Oh, awesome. And can you talk about, I know Greycroft has invested in a few game companies. Could you talk about some of those investments?
Yeah, so I think the biggest company that Greycroft has invested in on the gaming side has been Scopely. A mobile game studio based out here in LA. The investment was made before I got here, but I think they started off really early on with the company and followed on through a couple of stages as well. And some of their notable games are the Star Trek mobile game. They've done a Walking Dead mobile game and the Looney Tunes mobile game as well, and then a Dice with Buddies game. So that's kind of the biggest claim to fame at Greycroft from a gaming side. And then there have been a variety of others on the seed stage side, which are still developing their product or are still early in their launch as well.
And for our audience who may not understand, the sort of the influence or the impact of a lot of venture capital companies in starting new game companies, could you talk about maybe some of the more well-known game companies that have received venture financing and what role does venture or how often do venture companies get involved in starting the bigger game companies, for example?
Yeah, I would say venture's biggest role in gaming has been on the mobile gaming part. I would say the biggest success stories are companies like Supercell, Rovio, even companies here in LA, Scopely and Jam City, Pocket Gems up in the Bay Area. So I think the biggest success case for gaming venture capital has been in mobile, and that's partly because there was an introduction of a new hardware that disrupted the way players interacted with content. Other success cases have been Riot Games down here in LA was venture-backed. PC and console has been a little bit trickier because the revenue streams were traditionally very volatile. You would have a couple of years of nothing as you were going through game development and then a massive spike in sales. And that's just something that most venture capital funds are not really comfortable with. I would say they like steady state revenue, year-over-year growth. And that's just, and predictability, and that's just hard to have within the traditional gaming model. So PC and console has not been super disrupted by venture capital, I would say. And then the other aspect has been companies like Discord, Twitch, secondary, not related to content. It is interesting to see venture has played a pretty big role in the gaming industry, but it's been in certain scenarios and not in others.
Got it. In terms of during the early days of social, there was this big wave of investment in social gaming companies. And to your point, a lot of mobile gaming companies, there was this big rush of investment. It seemed there was a period that investment kind of slowed down from a venture perspective. And now there are a few Southern California-based companies, whether it's Bonfire, Second Dinner, some companies that are getting venture financing, or at least big corporate financing. Can you talk about the current state of venture investment in gaming companies? What are the current trends and what is the current environment like?
Yeah, I would say I think when the stage you were talking about where there was a rush of investment capital that flowed in, I would say there were probably a couple of people that were unsophisticated and probably didn't understand and just saw all the rush come in and decided to jump on board and realize quickly that maybe this isn't something that they should get involved in once they realize the dynamics related to the opportunities. I think it's a lot healthier now where it's the people that understand what they're getting into, especially on the mobile side where metrics are proven out, customer lifetime value, you can kind of solve for customer acquisition costs. And so I think it's made for a healthier environment now. And there are now game dedicated venture capital funds, which probably didn't exist 5, 6, 7 years ago. Ourselves, on the seed stage side, there's firms like Makers Fund, and Greycroft is solely focused on esports. And so there's a few more opportunities for people to invest that are solely focused on the industry and understand it really well. So I think it's a healthier dynamic now. And then you also have different players in the space now with kind of the NetEases and the Tencents of the world getting involved early as well. So I think it's a great time. It's a great time for the industry, and it's certainly something interesting for us to look at.
Right, and for maybe some folks in the audience who are interested in raising financing for their game studio, what are some of the things that, as an investor, that you look for? Like, what does it take to raise venture financing or to be attractive to you?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing overall is when you're looking for funding is to make sure you're able to get the investor to understand your broader vision, your message, and what success looks like for you as a company. That's like the overall goal of what you should try to target with your pitch. In terms of like key factors that we look for specifically, I think prior history of success in terms of launching a game or being a part of a team that has launched a game, because it's not easy to get to that finish line, and it's something that people can talk about and say, oh, we have this plan, but when push comes to shove and it's kind of launch date, sometimes people deliver and sometimes people don't, and we want to see a track record of that. The other thing that we really like to look for is we don't want a company to go into an oversaturated market. So we look for the competitive dynamics around that particular genre of game that they're trying to build or type of company that they're trying to create, and making sure that there's not a bunch of large players out there already. For example, if you were to go out and pitch, I'm going to make a shooter battle royale, it's like, why would you try to do that? Or a match 3 game right now, there's a lot, without IP, it's tough right now. And so those are some of the key elements that we look for. Making sure you have some sort of make sure you're creating value, and then you have a differentiated approach to capturing and maintaining that value for your organization. So.
Got it. And then you mentioned this tracker fund where you're focusing on sort of early stage investments. Can you talk a little bit more about the opportunity that you're seeing and what kind of companies you're specifically looking for?
Yeah, so in general, we're pretty flexible. The verticals we're focused on are gaming, esports, and VR AR. And traditionally it was built around looking for content developers, but it's not solely focused on that. And so for VR AR, actually, as hardware adoption has proven to be a little bit more challenging, although there have been positives around the Oculus Quest release last week or 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was. That has actually become more of a B2B investment platform where we're looking at investing in companies that are transforming healthcare or training or other aspects within businesses. And then on the gaming and esports side, we like content developers, but we don't have to. We've invested in companies that are for streaming, for example, a company called Sliver. We've invested in a company called Robot Cash, which is helping with game distribution. And so we've done a variety of different things, but I would say the core focus has been content development, and that's what we try to look for when we look for teams.
Got it. And then in terms of how you're sourcing deals and finding companies to invest in, what does the process look like?
Yeah. So part of it is there aren't that many gaming investors out there, so a lot of it does kind of flow inbound.
Okay.
But in terms of sourcing, for me, when I look for content developers, I check Steam, Kickstarter. I'll go to all the conference events like PAX and Gamescom and E3, which is coming down to LA soon, so that'll be great, and GDC. And we'll go out and we'll try to meet as many developers as we can and continue to build that network and find talented game developers. It's not easy, but it's something that we work at every day. And it's kind of a new thing within the game ecosystem. Traditionally, you would just get funding through your publisher and you give up a royalty. Right. We offer kind of a different value proposition that I think a lot of developers don't 100% understand. We've talked to a few where they're like, okay, how much money are you going to take away from us every time we sell a game? And it doesn't really work like that. You know, we get equity ownership in your company, so we win when you win. And so it's a different value prop, so we kind of have to go out there and sell it as a different model than what's traditionally been out there. And so there is kind of a learning process associated with it, but it's been fun. It's been great reaching out to all these talented game developers and trying to help them think through their next phase of growth and development.
Right. And maybe we could talk a little bit more about that aspect in terms of, sure, there's like the financial component where you're investing in companies and helping them out, but could you talk about other benefits of having, sort of a sophisticated venture fund invest in a company? What are some of the benefits, whether it's via relationships or whatever, that they'll be able to take advantage of?
So I would say the biggest things that we help out with are introductions to partnership opportunities. My partner, John Goldman, that I work with, ran Foundation 9 Entertainment, which was one of the largest independent game studios in North America. And so he has a wealth of connections within the industry, can open doors to a bunch of different people, and also help out with the hiring process, because it's pretty important. You can outsource a lot of stuff, but you got to have the right management in place and right key personnel. And so oftentimes we'll also help introduce to key hires. The other thing we kind of help out with is we do share a relationship with Skybound. And so alongside funding, if you need marketing or publishing support, we can kind of lead on Skybound a little bit for help and help introduce different aspects to benefit the game developers. And then I mentioned that we don't just invest in content creators. We have a variety of different companies. The other benefit is that there could be mutually beneficial relationships within the portfolio that we can help introduce people to. So for example, one of our companies helps with matching games with influencers and making sure they can help market the game and build views and help sales. And so if some of our content creators games fit a profile for Twitch viewership or YouTube viewership, it's an easy way for them to kind of put marketing dollars to work and enhance sales for their organization. So there are synergies within the portfolio that we try to help introduce to as well. So those are a few ways that we help out.
Got it. And for kind of going back to like maybe someone in the audience has a game studio and wants funding, wants to contact you, how would they kind of contact you, and what should they actually prepare in terms of materials, whether it's a presentation or whatever, to present to you so that you have a better sense of whether you want to invest or not?
Yeah, so I would say if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn, Joe Yuan, or you can email me at joeyuan@greycroft.com. But what we typically look for in terms of materials from an initial meeting would be an investor presentation where you have gameplay video or graphics or pictures depicting what you're making, kind of understanding who your team is, what your backgrounds are, and what the overall vision for the company is, and funding needs associated with that. And so just a basic presentation to understand the nuts and bolts of what's going on. We oftentimes also ask for a game design doc if it's well baked and far enough along for us to review. And then if the process continues, sometimes we'll ask for reference calls with people that you've worked with before or teams that you've worked with prior, so we can get an understanding of who you are as a person, as well as a CEO or management team member. And so those are a few of the key elements that we look for. But a lot of times your body of work will speak for itself as well. So if you've published a game developed a game beforehand, that's oftentimes a lot of what we dig into as well. So we'll play what you've done before and get an overall view of your body of work.
Got it. And then just thinking a little bit more high level, more strategically, as far as the venture capital industry relative to games, can you talk about where you see this playing out in terms of, like key trends, or how the industry may change with respect to venture capital for investing in games?
I wouldn't say there's a great answer for that. It's hard to say how things are going to shape out for overall venture capital within the gaming ecosystem. I think people got really excited about gaming, and you could see that in the public markets as well over the last couple of years when people started talking about games as a service and recurring revenue and the ability to monetize players really well. I don't know if that's necessarily the healthiest thing for the ecosystem, as you're squeezing a lot of value out of the players, and some of them are starting to get a little bit upset about it. If you look at Reddit, you look at what Epic's game store has done, and people have been a little bit upset about that as well. And so it's interesting. We'll see how things progress. I will say that there is an abundance of capital available if you are a talented developer. And so you can raise money if you are skilled and talented and can create a great product, and have shown that before. Uncertain about how it's going to shape out in the future. I really don't know. You have Tencents and NetEases of the world coming in at the late stage and also wanting to get involved in the early stage. Then you have venture capital funds that are looking to finance you at the seed, Series A, Series B, or even growth level. And so there's a variety of different funding sources. I don't know and then there's the traditional publishing funding as well. And so really unsure how it's going to work out, but I think whatever it is, it's going to be great for the content creators because you're just going to have a variety of options to choose from, and you can kind of pick and choose how you want to fund and fuel the growth of your business.
Cool. And then just kind of going back to you talked a little bit about sort of your background and career, but could you talk more specifically about, how did you wind up at Greycroft and why did you want to join the company?
Yeah. So for me, before coming here, I mentioned I was in business school. I went to business school so that I could transition out of that industry that I was in before. So I worked in the oil and gas industry, doing investment banking and private equity, so focusing on the financial side. And I enjoyed it, but it wasn't an industry that I was particularly passionate about or felt connected to. And so I went to business school and wanted to kind of figure out, where I saw myself in the next 5 or 10 years. And things kind of always came back to gaming. I was always watching Twitch. I was always playing video games. And there were a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of interesting things happening in the sector, whether it was esports or games as a service, stabilizing revenues, and growth in Asia and mobile. And then now we're talking about cloud gaming and game streaming. So there was always a lot of interesting trends emerging. So I got really interested in it. So I did a summer internship doing product management for a mobile gaming company. And then decided I wanted to kind of bring what I had done before school with what I loved, and so wanted to bring investing and gaming together. There weren't a lot of people out there that were doing that, and so the options were kind of limited. But I will say, I noticed Greycroft was doing some stuff in gaming, and then I found John was, a seasoned gaming operator and had a role at Greycroft as a partner. And so I reached out, and this opportunity worked out. And so that's kind of how I chose it. It was more based off of, there weren't that many options to choose from if you wanted to get involved on early stage investing in gaming. There were only a few companies out there. And so fortunate that things did work out. But it was more just the fact that there were only a few opportunities out there that allowed for something like this to happen.
Great. And last question for people in the audience who are interested in the venture capital industry, and especially with respect to a venture capital firm investing in games, what advice would you have for them to be able to transition into the type of role that you have now?
Yeah, it's hard to give a perfect answer because my path was a little bit non-traditional. I would say most venture capital firms prefer people that have experience on the entrepreneurial side. So maybe going and trying to build your own game or start your own company, understand how companies are run. And then the other side of the way you get into venture capital is through traditional consulting or investment banking, where you kind of build up a valuation or an analysis skill set. And then afterwards transition to the industry and kind of narrow in on your vertical focus that you want to spend time in. So you can kind of pick and choose which route you want and which route you think is better suited for your individual skill set. But those are kind of the two more traditional methods for people that get involved in venture capital and investing. But there is no perfect path, I would say. I think everyone has a pretty unique way that they got into venture capital most of the time. So especially in the gaming side of things, because it is so new and so different.
Okay, great. Well, those are all the questions I have. Thank you very much for your time, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks so much.